I spent the first 20 years of my life in this country not being counted. I was paying taxes, I was working, I had to obey all the rules of the land, I had to be a law-abiding citizen, but I still wasn't recognised as being an Australian citizen, and thinking about that makes me even more not angry, but more concerned that we haven't moved on from there. The Constitution, this is my favourite topic, the Constitution. I usually have a copy of it with me that I can wave around and show you exactly what it looks like. But the Constitution is a little booklet, the one that I've got anyway. It's about that big and about that wide. And in it, I see it as being holding the laws of the country. That this is the document that says what shall happen in Australia. When it was written at the end of the 1800s, 1894, 1895, 1896, they were sort of working on it. And this was a group of white men, of course, that were doing this. And they wrote it up and completely disregarded that Aboriginal people existed. So there's nothing in the Constitution except a couple of phrases about race relations in Australia, one of them that was amended in 1967. But there's nothing in there that says that this country, prior to 1788, was populated by Aboriginal people. And that's, for an Aboriginal person, that's rather disconcerting to look at this document that's held up as being so important to this country and find little or no reference to you as an Aboriginal person. You'd think that after the Mabo decision, and I've forgotten the date of it, 92, yes, I'm getting the nod from Ed, 92. You'd think that in 92, when the High Court, and I think it was a 6-1 vote in the High Court, where they declared terra nullius didn't exist anymore across this country, that would have been the opportunity to say, well, because we've got this decision from the High Court, then we must do something about these founding documents. But of course they didn't. They ignored the process at all. My friend and I, who's come here tonight, we were talking about a fabulous documentary that we've been watching that talks about the effort that Aboriginal people have been going through for the past 100 years or more, trying to get recognition and getting a voice to the governing bodies of this country. I mean, it goes right back to the 1800s, 1830s. And Aboriginal people were protesting and petitioning governments within this country about wanting to have a say, wanting to have a voice about what's happening to them, but all to no avail. So it's time. I didn't think I'd live to see this day, to be quite honest. I'm really pleased that I'm here. But I really didn't think that I'd live to see this day, that we're going to have a vote in a week's time and we're all going to be there and we're going to have a say to say nothing outlandish. We're not going to overturn the government. We're not going to claim all sorts of things. All we want is a recognition for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Constitution. Just one small chapter to be added to this little book that's the basis of our democracy. That's all we're asking for. And then we want to have an advisory group, not something that's going to change laws or incur taxes or do anything of that nature, to give advice. It's like I heard someone describe it as it's similar to the local P&C at the school. A group of people are getting together and are going to give advice to the people who make the decisions. And the rest of the detail that a lot of people seem to be so keen on understanding, the rest of the detail is going to be worked out by parliamentarians, the people that we have elected who are already sitting in our parliament. So there's no great conspiracy or grand design by Aboriginal people to take over Australia. We're only 3% of the population, so that's not going to work. So think about it. On the 14th of October, when you go to place your vote, write a simple yes, if you wish, and pop it in the box. And what you are voting for is a fair go for Aboriginal people to be included in the Constitution and to have the right to provide advice about laws that are going to impact on them. And that's all it is. But before I hand over the microphone to somebody else, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be invited to speak to you all and to come here. I was saying a little bit earlier, this is the third occasion that I've had to be speaking to the Sikh group of people, and I've always felt welcome. The other temple that I went into, it was exactly the same. I was made to feel welcome. The hospitality was shown. There was a lot of smiling faces and a lot of support. So I'd like to thank you all very much for the support that you're giving this cause, and it is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to be back to the Gurdwara. It means a great deal for us that you have opened doors and invited us here today. And as someone who's grown up around here, I have to say, having grown up with a lot of Sikh friends and then seeing what you've been able to do in terms of building the Gurdwara, and in my role, I travel quite a bit. And whenever I come back, as soon as I see those domes on the Gurdwara, I know I'm home. It is such a great thing to see your Gurdwara when you're driving up along the motorway there to get home. Thank you for what you have done for our community, and thank you for inviting us here today to speak with you on a very important point in time. We're about, friends, to vote on a referendum. To the west of us here, this is the biggest community of Aboriginal people in the country. We're here on Darug land, and I want to pay my respects to the Darug, thank them for their custodianship, pay my respects to elders past and present and every Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander here today. Because the community out here, people wouldn't realise how big it is, and it's one of the biggest in the country. And nearly 80% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are very keen to have a voice to Parliament. So that, plus the fact of the size of the community, it's a big deal for me personally, but as a parliamentarian, to vote yes and to ask you to do the same. And in doing so, friends, recognise that when the British allowed Australia to stand on its own 2 feet, and there was a constitution that was written 122 years ago, that constitution didn't recognise that for 65,000 years, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were here. And so there's been a conversation for many years saying, we need to fix this. It started many years ago, even under John Howard, recognising that we had to recognise the First Nations of this country. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people came together in 2017 and they said, yes, we would like to be recognised in the Constitution, but don't just recognise us. Do something that is just as important to us, and that is to listen, and set up a body that can help make that happen. And so that that body has strength and isn't changed all the time, that it is recognised in the Constitution, and that it will not be something that is changed every time there's an election. So recognise, set up something that will listen through the voice, and by listening to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, because this voice, the way it is set up, is it's designed to have government listen to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people about anything that is done specific to them. Everyone, I'm sure, would agree, governments can always do, it doesn't matter if they're Labor or Liberal, governments can always do a better job of listening. And if you believe that, then the voice is a good place to start. But more than anything else, friends, I just think we have this moment in time to correct something that has been around for years and has not been right. As you well know, it's important to recognise those cultures before us, to recognise how long they have been and to extend that respect. And the best way we can do that in the coming weeks, friends, is to vote yes in this Constitution and to recognise that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of this country were here for 65,000 years, and it is right and just that they are recognised in our Constitution and that we extend that respect by listening to them. And I hope that you can all vote yes.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and to the Australian Sikh Association for bringing everyone together today to talk about this really critical national event that will happen in a week's time, and to the Gurdwara again for showing the hospitality to myself and my wife Patricia, to my political colleagues like Ed Husak and others. And can I acknowledge all the community leaders that are in the room here today. Could I also acknowledge that we're on Darug land. This is First Nations land, and I want to particularly thank Auntie Anne for her contribution to kick this event off tonight. Because what we did just then in listening to Auntie Anne was exactly what the voice is designed to do. To bring us together and to listen to First Nations peoples and hear their experience before we make decisions that impact upon First Nations peoples. Because ultimately, that's what we're being asked to do in a week's time. We're being asked whether or not as a country, before we make decisions that impact on First Nations peoples, the peoples that have been in this continent for 65,000 years, the longest continuous culture anywhere on the planet, before we make decisions about First Nations peoples, listen to people like Auntie Anne, hear their experiences, so that when we make laws or we allocate resources, that it does the best we possibly can for the longest continuous culture on the planet. I don't know about you, but when I realise that there are places on this continent that have rock art that go back 30 or 40 or 50,000 years, you can see complex art representing a culture from 40 or 50,000 years ago, right here amongst us. And some of that art that goes back 15 or so thousand years is right here in Sydney. It's absolutely remarkable. And yet we allow resource companies and property developers to destroy this art, to destroy that culture without talking to First Nations peoples first. How do we do that? We do that because we haven't got it right. We haven't got the balance right. So in a week's time, we are all going to be asked at the ballot box about whether we're going to write yes or whether we're going to write no. And I can tell you now, I'm a Green senator. My party is committed to yes. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to write yes. But I also know that here amongst the Sikh community, we share so many values in common. And those four critical values from the Sikh community of equality and social justice, of service to humanity and tolerance for other peoples and other religions. Those four core values of the Sikh religion seem to me to strongly support a yes campaign, and I'll particularly pick one of them, social justice. I think many people in the Sikh community know how important it is to be heard by your government, to be respected, to be listened to. You know, I know that particularly the Sikh community can feel visible on our streets in a way that other communities can't. So if you have groups in society that want to target you or marginalise you, the Sikh community knows what it can be like to be picked out on the street, to be visible and not to be heard and not to be respected. And how important it is that the police or the state government or the federal government sits down and talks with you, understands your concerns and listens, so that you're represented in Parliament, you're represented in Council. And I think that sense of social justice and connectedness, in my experience, has seen a real acknowledgement in the Sikh community about the struggle of First Nations peoples. Because when Ed and Auntie Anne mentioned how long First Nations people have been in this continent, 65,000 years, it's hard to understand how long that is. That's more than 3,000 generations. 3,000 times that knowledge has been passed from father and auntie and mum to child to nephew. 3,000 times that information and knowledge has been gathered and collected and passed down. And I compare that to my connection to this country. My mum's family, for example, came here in 1900. Have been here for maybe 4 generations, 4. And I compare that to Auntie Anne's connection as a Wiradjuri woman of 3,000 generations. How could we not be a better society from listening to Auntie Anne before we make decisions about the planet? How could we not? And I just might address quickly some of the false arguments that have been raised by the No campaign, because some of you may have seen it on Facebook or heard it from your neighbours. One of the arguments raised by the No campaign is somehow or other, if we vote yes, that Auntie Anne's going to come and take our backyard. That is plainly wrong. What we're voting for is a consultative body, not a decision-making body. The Voice will create a representative body that won't be able to make laws, won't be able to take anyone's property, but will be required to be listened to. Ed and I are still going to argue in the federal parliament about what the laws will be. It's just we're going to have the benefit of talking to Auntie Anne before we do that. It's not going to take anyone's land. It's never intended to. Other people have said that voting yes will somehow divide us. We'll create 2 tiers in Australian society, First Nations people and everybody else. Well, can I tell you right now, we already are divided. And First Nations people feel it particularly harshly. First Nations people are more likely to go to jail, their kids are more likely to go to jail than university in their own country. First Nations people die 10 years on average before the rest of us. First Nations people are less likely to have a home, less likely to have wealth. It's their country that we're living in, and yet they face systemic division. We're trying to bridge that gap and bridge that division. Far from dividing us, if we vote yes for this campaign, we will be uniting us, bringing us together, forcing us to sit down and talk like we're doing today. Is tonight dividing us in any way? When we sit down and hear from each other and talk to each other? Of course it's not. Tonight is uniting us, bringing us together. And that's what the Voice will do as well. So I'd ask you, when you see these false arguments, to really look through them and think about your own personal values and your own experience, and talk to your neighbours and your friends. Because I am still hopeful that in a week's time this country will do the right thing. We'll acknowledge the 65,000 years of continuing occupation of First Nations peoples. We'll acknowledge their wisdom, and we'll, with a generous hand, reach out and create a voice to Parliament. But I know this for a fact, regardless of what happens in a week's time, the Sikh community and the core principles that drives your community will keep you connected with First Nations peoples. And the connections that happened in this campaign, I hope, will deepen and strengthen, and together we can do more of this. Listen to each other, talk with each other, respect each other, support each other. Because at the end of the day, that's what a good democratic society will do. Thank you again to the Australian Sikh Association. Thank you all for coming tonight to listen for us. Thank you to Auntie Anne for her generosity and her knowledge and her wisdom. And let's together make this yes campaign really sing. Thank you very much.
Look at the irony. Migrants are sitting and they are thinking to decide if the original owner of this land should have a voice in the parliament. How dare we? That's the basic question. How dare we? Mool Nivasi, as David explained, they've been here for 65,000 years. 65,000 saal to. I'll jump more into Punjabi. That's where I can come out more clearly. 65,000 ਸਾਲ ਤੋਂ ਇਸ ਧਰਤੀ ਤੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅੱਜ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਪੈ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਅਧਿਕਾਰ ਦੇ ਦਿਓ. Give us a recognition in the constitution. ਜਿਹੜਾ no campaigner ਨੇ, they are trying to come up with lot of arguments. ਇਹ ਕੋਈ law making body नहीं है referendum ने बना देनी. It's not a law making body, it's a advisory committee. एक advisory committee है ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ if the parliament is going to make any laws which concerns the First Nation people, they'll ask the advisory committee what do they think about those laws. If they are relevant to them, then only they will have a say. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬਾਕੀ there is no question ਕਿ ਬਾਕੀ ਕਿਸੇ laws ਨੂੰ they will impact. ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਸਿੱਖ, ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਪ੍ਰਾਊਡ ਸਿੱਖ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਲੋਕੀ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਬੋਰਨ ਆਊਟ ਆਫ ਸਟਰੋਂਗ ਸੈਂਸ ਆਫ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਜਸਟਿਸ. ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਕੋਈ ਇਨਜਸਟਿਸ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਪਰ ਕਿਤੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਤੇ ਇਸ ਕੰਟਰੀ 'ਚ ਆ ਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਲੋਕੀ ਘਰਾਂ ਤੇ ਕਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਗੁੰਮ ਹੋ ਗਏ. ਅਸਲੀ ਕਿਤੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਤੇ ਅਵੇਸਲੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਵੀ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੂਲ ਨਿਵਾਸੀ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਹੱਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਨਾ ਕਿਤੇ ਇਗਨੋਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ. ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਹੱਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਤਾਂ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਹੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਹੱਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਖੜਨਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਫਰਜ਼ ਬਣਦਾ ਹੈ. ਤੇ 14 ਅਕਤੂਬਰ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਟਿਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ IS, ਉੱਥੇ ਰਾਈਟ ਕਰਨਾ IS. So there is some confusion. So make sure you write yes on 14th of October. ਇਹ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਅਨ ਡੈਮੋਕ੍ਰੇਸੀ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਬਿਗੇਸਟ ਮੂਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ. Australian democracy will decide if we are progressive enough as a society. Okay? So it's a testing point. Canada has signed a treaty with their own First Nation people. New Zealand, our younger brother, they have signed a treaty. So this is the first step, but a very significant step, very small step towards truth and treaty and sovereignty. ਕਿਤੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਪੜ੍ਹਾਈ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਦੇਸ਼ ਦੀ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਮੈਨੂਪਲੇਟਡ ਹੈ. ਮੇਰੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਬੱਚੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਵੀ ਜੋ ਵਾਟ ਐਵਰ ਆਂਟੀ ਆਨ ਸੈਡ, it is totally different what they know from their school education. So truth must be told and history must be corrected. ਜੋ ਹੋਇਆ ਮਾੜਾ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਹੰਟਿੰਗ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਸ਼ਿਕਾਰ ਖੇਡਦੇ ਸੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ. ਛੱਪੜਾਂ ਦੇ ਪਾਣੀ ਜਿੱਥੋਂ ਪਸ਼ੂ ਪੀਂਦੇ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਪਾਣੀਆਂ 'ਚ ਜ਼ਹਿਰ ਮਿਲਾ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਚੱਕ ਕੇ ਲੈ ਗਏ ਸੀ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਬੱਚੇ ਪਾਲਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦੇ. ਉੱਥੋਂ ਵਰਲਡ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ ਸਟੋਲਨ ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ, ਜਿਹਦੀ ਤੇ ਥੈਂਕਫੁਲੀ ਕੈਵਨ ਰੱਡ ਨੇ ਮਾਫੀ ਵੀ ਮੰਗੀ ਸੀ. ਤੋ ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਹਾਈ ਟਾਈਮ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਫਾਰ ਅ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਲਾਈਕ ਅਸ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਖੜੇ ਹੋਈਏ ਰਾਈਟ ਸਾਈਡ ਤੇ. ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਨੋ ਕੈਂਪੇਨਰਸ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਬਟ ਕਰੋ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਦੇ ਹੈਵ देयर ਓਨ ਰੀਜ਼ਨਸ। ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਦੇਸ਼ ਡਿਵਾਈਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ, ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਐਡਵਾਈਜ਼ਰੀ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਬਣਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਫਸਟ ਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਲਾਅ ਪਾਸ ਹੋਏਗਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛ ਲਿਆ ਜਾਊਗਾ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ, ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਦੈਟਸ ਸ਼ੇਮਫੁਲ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ very much. I would like to thank, on behalf of the board, Auntie Anne Flood, Ed Hussain, David Shoebridge, Patricia, and Lee Rehanan. Thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you very much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.